Thank you, Dan, and thank you, John, for his brilliant presentation on wealth taxation. And as we saw, it's a very controversial subject, and I hope after my presentation on property taxation, we will have a better comprehension and distinction between wealth taxation and property taxation. I believe I can add already that the threshold of the income and the threshold of the value of the property is also a very important aspect of wealth taxation. So the threshold is very important. So up to certain threshold, it can be like a normal property taxation or income tax. But if you earn more than a certain amount, or if your property is above a certain threshold, the value of your property is above a certain threshold, you are now taxable to wealth taxation. In certain countries made like that, like in Burundi, for example, if you own a property that value is above a certain threshold, you you pay wealth tax on this property. But yeah, we will come back to that. Maybe we can just start with the property taxation, and we'll see if we have more questions about that. We can try to find to answer those questions together. Yes. Thank you very much. So my colleagues John already talked about wealth taxation. So now we are going to focus more on property taxation and see what is property taxation. We all have properties. I own a cell phone, I own probably a car, it's my property. I probably also own a land somewhere. What are we going to tax? Are we going to tax all those properties, or are we going to select some properties that we want to tax? And why are we selecting those? Yeah. So generally we will try to go to define to the definition of the property taxation and identification of tax base. That can be also challenging. Identification of taxpayers, the tax rate, how the tax rate are designed in different jurisdictions, and why they design those tax rate like differently. What are the different approach to tax properties? And we'll talk also about tax collection and the challenges. And the prospect, we will talk about the digitalization of the economy and digitalization in general, and how it can affect property taxation, and how we can take advantage of that. Okay. So, what is property taxation? So we will focus here on property taxation. What are we going to tax? So property tax refers to a tax on real property, and generally property tax are ad valorem based on a fixed proportion of the value of the property on which the tax is assessed. So for now, it's quite the definition is quite basic in its general. We will go into the details and the exceptions during the presentation. So ad valorem properties tax are based on ownership of the property. We will see that we will also talk about the transfer of the properties, not only the ownership during the presentation. So the tax is payable regardless of whether the property is used and regardless of whether it generates income to for the owner. So yeah, we can have like different way of tax properties, whether it's like developed property or undeveloped lands, or based also on the users of the property. So that's what I said. So the property tax may also be referred as a land tax, especially if the property is undeveloped, yes. So this presentation will focus on real estate ownership tax as well as real estate transfer taxes. So up to now, do we have any question? Because you can interrupt me at any time, so we can make it more interactive. And if you have any question, just raise your hand and let me know. Okay. Since apparently there is no question, I would like to ask you what you think about property taxation. Because generally, I buy a property with my income, or yeah, whether I'm an employee or I own a business, I already been taxed on my income. I already been taxed on my salary. And then I buy a property. Because I own a property, I'm paying another tax. Is it not like economical double taxation? Is it fair to tax me after I have already paid like income tax, for example, on my salary or my business, because I used my profit to buy a property? So yeah, that is also a question we. Sorry, yeah. Maybe you can use your microphone.
Okay. To me, it is not fair. But I'm looking forward if you can convince me to accept you.
Let's see how it goes. I'm not here to convince you. It's not really my main objective. We can discuss and see together whether we should tax or not.
On to that.
Yeah.
To me, as you said, if somebody have already paid an income tax,
Yeah.
which is let's say the net profit, all right. For corporate income tax, is only tax on your profit, for instance. Now, I'm thinking, that's why I was trying to clearly see the difference between property tax and wealth tax. I'm thinking that it is just a kind of wealth tax that aims at narrowing inequality. That's how I see it. Because somebody who owns a property is a rich. So even though you have tax, income is for everybody. Anybody who earns pays a tax. But within the gap, we have those who have more that have acquired properties. And so it's a way of trying to bridge the inequality gap. That's why you have to get from those who have properties, shares or whatever as a rich, and then use it to bridge the gap. To me, that's what I think it is.
Yeah, it's also a good approach, but yeah, okay, I'll take that into account. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
I think there's an assumption here that the person that owns the property already has paid income taxes. What if he inherited it? You understand me? So if he inherited it, maybe his father's income tax had been paid, but now he's the one that inherited it. So what are we going to do about that one? That's one case. And then I also want to paint a scenario I found in a climb. If you are using Tesla car that doesn't use fuel in some parts of the US, you will be expected to pay some taxes, because it's believed that by running that car, you are not using fuel, and so you are saving costs. But somehow, they still make you to pay, so as to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. Because for you to buy that car, it's assumed that you are wealthy, you have some funds that is not available to the other man that uses a gasoline engine car. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you, for your contribution. So you can see, yeah, before the last intervention, before we continue, yeah.
Sorry, hold on, everyone. Mine is rather for concern for taxpayers. Over time, we've seen how different taxes comes up because of trends in taxation. But I feel somehow we are not looking at that aspect of overburdening taxpayers. So in as much as we found an angle to tax the income of an individual, I still see no contribution or development, or perhaps some progress for the individual if we're now still looking at taxing the properties they got from a tax we've taken from their income already. So I think we should take it easy on taxpayers.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, and we will see that in the administration, it's also very difficult in many jurisdictions. I don't know, but we have people from different countries here, so we can exchange our experiences. But it's very difficult to collect the income, the property tax at the individual level. Because I see that, especially in Francophone countries, we have property tax even on corporate like companies, like real estate owned by companies. It's easier to collect, but at the individual level, it's very complicated. Like it's a kind of self-assessment. You have to declare yourself, and not many people are willing to declare their property. So we will see that later in the challenges. Yeah. So identification of the tax base. What is the tax base for developed properties, for example? What is the tax base? Is it the market value? Is it the rental value? Is it like the surface? So we need first to identify the tax base. Are we taxing, like for developed properties, the land as well as the building, or do we separate them and tax them differently, separately? Is it even manageable at the tax administration level? Like how to do that technically? So for developed and undeveloped properties, so in many countries we have cadastre registers that kind of have all the information about the properties in the country normally. And generally, they also have like the valuation of those properties, like the administrative valuation. And based on that, for those countries, it can be easier to calculate the tax, like to calculate this tax. But it's not very easy to keep this cadastral register up to date, because the economy is like not static. So at some point things can happen. COVID can happen. We can discover like minerals in the neighborhood or something. So the value of the property, the administrative valuation, is not always accurate, and it needs to be updated like regularly. Normally in certain countries it's like 5 years. Every 5 years they have to update the cadastral register, and with the new value, with a new valuation. I saw that in Nigeria you have a national valuer. Correct me if I'm wrong. That values the properties, and for that it's maybe can be easier to administrate. But even this valuation process, is it easy to implement? How to evaluate a land, a property all over the country is a huge task for the valuers. And to make it easier, in certain countries they prefer like the self-assessment based on the selling price or the market value of the property in case of transfer without consideration, or when it's like you inherited a property. Yeah. And when it's even that, it's also difficult to administrate. They use the surface area. So they just consider the surface area, like in Burundi, I think. They just the surface area, not the value of the property, just the surface to calculate the tax due. Any question at that point? No? Okay. It's interactive, and we are learning from each other. So if you have other... Oh? I will stick... Oh, okay. So on transfer of asset, we will have almost the same problems. valuing and in identification of the assets. But generally, we also use the sale price. When you transfer a property, the sale price can be the tax base, or the surface area, the market value, the rental value, annual rental value. So we will have the same issues, whether it's an administrative valuation of or a self-assessment. But in this specific case, we generally have a third party. For many countries, especially in Francophone region, the transfer have to be made in front of a notary. So the notary is the collector in that case for the transfer tax, transfer of immovable properties. Yeah. And another issue is the identification of the taxpayer, who is the owner of the property, the real owner of the property. So the cadastral register should have this information, but is it always up to date? That's my question. I don't know how it works in Nigeria. Do we know who owns all the properties in the country? Sorry? Senegal. We have Senegal, Sierra Leone, Togo, and Guinea-Bissau. So how does it work in your country? How do you identify the real owner of properties? Sorry? Yeah, but is it up to date? For example, in Nigeria, is it automatically updated? Yeah, Senegal want to say something?
Ok, merci. Pour le cas du Sénégal, l'identification des propriétaires se fait à travers deux volets. D'abord, il y a le cadastre. Le cadastre qui est chargé de la cartographie nationale et donc qui possède les noms des propriétaires de tous les terrains qui sont des titres fonciers ou des baux. Et on a également la conservation foncière qui tient un livre foncier, on l'appelle un livre foncier. Et la conservation foncière joue un peu le rôle que joue le service des transports pour les véhicules. Vous savez que par exemple, dans chaque pays, les véhicules sont immatriculés, ont un numéro et on connaît le nom du propriétaire. La conservation foncière chez nous joue le même rôle pour les terrains. Donc chaque terrain, on a la superficie, le nom du propriétaire et les transactions qui interviennent sur le terrain. Si vous allez à la première capitale du Sénégal, Saint-Louis, vous allez trouver des terrains qui étaient là depuis 1800, 1800 et quelques. Et depuis l'existence du terrain, vous avez tout l'historique. Donc à chaque fois qu'il y a même une transaction, le terrain est cédé ou le propriétaire est décédé, ses héritiers sont enregistrés. Et donc sur les titres fonciers et les baux, on n'a pas de problème. Maintenant, le problème que nous avons, c'est sur la partie des terres qui ne sont pas encore immatriculées. Là, j'avoue qu'on n'a pas une bonne maîtrise des propriétaires, par rapport aux propriétaires. Et donc, il y a une partie de l'impôt qui nous échappe sur les terrains non encore immatriculés.
Yeah, that's a very good approach in Senegal. So they have, first of all, the cadastral register and another register for all the lands, like registration of plate number of vehicles. They have the same system for the immovable properties to register them. And yeah, so the challenges at the level is more like the non-registered properties, so they cannot really collect tax from them. So it's very a good system in Senegal. Maybe we can also learn from that. If someone else has another example in the country, in the jurisdiction. Yeah.
So it's not about West Africa, but I think it's something we can learn from. But of course, it also depends on the realities of each country. So I think one of the countries in Africa that has a very comprehensive property register is Rwanda. Probably because of the size of the country. It's a very small country. But I also think that they were able to benefit from lots of fundings from donors to then be able to map out all the lands and then identify properties on those lands. But I guess the question we can ask also is how was it possible? Because in other countries too, you have donors funding these projects, but it doesn't get to this point. So I think what comes out also is political leadership, where sometimes if you have strong political leadership, you get to the point where I think you push for those successful reforms. But it's probably an exception in Africa, but it's something worth sharing, but perhaps we can learn from. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Yeah.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Je vais vous parler du cas togolais.
Togo, yeah.
Et au Togo, nous avons deux services de cadastre. Il y a le cadastre juridique qui rassemble tous les documents, les terrains déjà immatriculés. Il y a le cadastre fiscal qui pour les terrains non encore immatriculés. Mais chaque début d'année, il y a un recensement qui se fait pour identifier les propriétaires de chaque terrain à travers ceux qui ont loué ces propriétés. Donc, c'est en cela que le Togo se procède pour avoir quand même une idée des différents propriétaires des terrains. J'avoue que, comme le Sénégal, il y a une bonne partie de l'imposition qui nous échappe par rapport aux terrains non encore immatriculés. Sinon, pour avoir une petite partie, c'est à travers les recensements fiscaux que le Togo arrive à avoir quelques propriétaires des terrains non encore immatriculés. Merci.
Thank you very much. I think in Togo it's almost the same as in Senegal, but even in their countries they also try to even register all the property, even those that are not immatriculated, like not registered in officially. So yeah, so we can also take that into account. Yeah. Thank you very much. So when we identify is yeah.
Muito bom dia a todos. Eu sou da Guiné-Bissau. Nós, de facto, em relação à lei da terra, temos uma lei da terra, mas esta lei requeria na altura a sua regulamentação. Só recentemente a regulamentação foi concluída, mas ainda faltava muita coisa para a sua implementação prática. Relativamente aos registros, todos os registros normalmente são feitos junto do Ministério da Justiça. No entanto, o Ministério da Justiça, para proceder ao registro, normalmente envia estes contribuintes para a Direção-Geral de Contribuições e Impostos para efeitos de tributação. Portanto, sem a tributação não é possível proceder ao registro do imóvel. Portanto, é condição prévia para o Ministério da Justiça poder proceder ao registro que o contribuinte proceda ao pagamento dos impostos que nós chamamos aí o imposto de CISA. Portanto, é relativamente à terra. Quanto aos registros dos imóveis, esse sim, nós temos um registro junto da Direção-Geral de Contribuições e Impostos que procede ao registro e para efeitos de tributação de todos os imóveis das casas. Portanto, esse registro, nestes últimos tempos, está desatualizado e estamos na fase de atualização do próprio registro, sobretudo da capital, Bissau, que o registro que foi feito é de 20 anos atrás. portanto, requeria uma nova atualização. Estamos em fase de ultimar o projeto. Provavelmente, se tudo correr bem, até finais de setembro vamos poder concluir essa nova atualização do registro de imóveis e que vai nos permitir transversalmente poder tributar todas as outras atividades conexas aos próprios imóveis. Portanto, é um registro que está desatualizado, mas que fica centralizado na Direção-Geral de Contribuições e Impostos e que ainda vai estar na fase da sua atualização. Por último, de referir que no nosso sistema estes registros são reservados aos impostos municipais. São impostos municipais, mas devido à fragilidade da implementação efetiva da lei de municípios, que é as novas coletividades locais, ainda não está em vigor, o Estado criou que transitoriamente esse imposto vai ser coletado pela Direção-Geral de Contribuições e Impostos ao nível nacional. Por isso, a direção continua transitoriamente a gerir este imposto, sobretudo na melhoria do seu cadastro antes da efetivação da lei que prevê a realização de coletividades municipais. Muito obrigado.
Thank you. How do you say it in your country? Obrigado. Yeah.
Obrigado.
Thank you very much. So yeah, the main challenge now.
Let me.
Yeah.
I wish to.
Where are we? Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I want to speak about a subnational in Nigerian Ekiti State. My name is Opayemi Oladele. In Ekiti State, we've been able to map out the entire properties in the state using satellite imagery. And then we've gone ahead to have a geocode for every properties in the state. So having done that, we only realized when we were doing the entire enumeration in the state that we were unable to get the owners of the properties details. Because one of the challenges is that some of them refused to divulge the information of their property. But what we've been able to do is this. With the geocode of the entire properties being assigned to each of the buildings by their owner, we have come up with a public portal where you can input this your geocode and use the geocode to update your data. So by doing that, we are able to get the entire properties owners with the attributes in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting system that can be updated kind of automatically in your state. That's very interesting because one of the main challenges is how to update those register and how to update the cadastral register with the new information and having like all the information gathered in one place so we can identify the taxpayers. So after identification of the taxpayer, we also have like some exemptions. In generally, it's in most of the countries, the exemptions are the same, like residential house owners, like government and assimilated association recognized as being of public utility, religious organization, school, new buildings. So those are generally the taxpayers that are exempt from property taxation, whether it's permanent or temporary. Yeah. Now, for this purpose, we also need exchange of information between tax authorities and tax responsible for issuance of property titles. So, the administration in charge of issuing property title should be in good connection with tax administration. So whenever there is a issuance of a new property title, the information should be automatically shared with tax administration, so we know that we have a new taxpayer, potential taxpayer. Yeah. So that can be also a way of implementation of this property tax to be more efficient. So update the cadastral register regularly, and also have this automatic exchange of information between those two authorities. Yeah. So I gathered a few examples of rates, how the rate structure is done in few countries. So I picked few examples, like in Burkina Faso, where I'm from, by the way. So we have property tax on undeveloped lands for companies, like 10% on rental value, and individual is like 0.2% of the cadastral value for undeveloped land, and for developed land for companies still 10%, and individual is for residential purposes it's 0.1% on cadastral value, and others is 0.2% also on cadastral value. So we can see that for the companies it's more like the annual rental value, the taxation base, and for the individuals it's more the cadastral value. In Burundi, we have like the surface, as I said previously. So we have the tax rate depend of the surface of the property and how it's constructed, with bricks or without framing or clay constructions. So the rate differ on the surface and how the building is made of, whether brick or clay. So, and also they have a tax on pylon and mats. So for fixed rate, yeah.
Please, for clarity, I want to really find out, because in my own state, when you are talking about property tax, there are different taxation. I'm from Cross River State. For a property, we have what we call ground rent, which is still under property tax. We have what we call rental income, which is still a property tax. And what we call capital gain tax, when there's exchange in house of property. So, and which all have different method of assessment or calculation. For a ground rent, is depending on the cadastral. For rental income or for capital gain, we take 10%. So what actually are we calculating? I also have, yes, I understand we talk about developed and undeveloped area. But what are we calculating there? What is the property tax are we calculating now? Please, just for clarity, thank you.
Okay, since I said at the beginning, now we are focusing only on property tax on ownership and transfer. We will talk about capital gain and rental income tomorrow. This is another session on, it's still property taxation, but as income tax. Here we are more on the capital tax on the capital. So we are only focusing on the ownership of the capital and the transfer of the capital. Okay, the assets, yeah. So it's more the property tax on that aspect, yeah.
Can we say it's capital gain tax?
Yeah, we will talk about capital gain tax tomorrow as an income tax. Capital gain is an income, right? As rental income, we will talk about it. It's the session, I think it's the second session tomorrow. I don't know, but yeah, we will talk about that in a separate session. We separated the capital tax from the income tax on properties. Yeah, since it's a bit too income stream, different income stream. And here we are not even talking about income. We are talking about tax on capital. Yeah, thank you. So this is an example of a fixed rate on capital ownership. And in Nigeria, I was a bit traumatized by the way you calculate this. It's very, yes, I don't like math. So when I saw the formula, I was like, okay, I need people from Nigeria to explain to me how it works. But I understand that you want it to be, the tax to be very fair, and made a lot of adjustments and exemptions and so many criteria to make the tax to be very fair. I understand that. It's a bit confusing for someone who is not used to the tax system in Nigeria. So you have like the land users charge, right? This is the land use charge, yeah? So LA is the area of land parcel in square meter. So LA, okay? I need to read because otherwise I get lost. The average LR is the average market value of the land parcel in the neighborhood. So right? Plus BA. BA is a total developed floor area of building on the plot of land in square meter. Okay. And BR is the average construction of medium quality building in an improvement in the neighborhood. So you want to take into account even the average construction quality building. Okay. DR is the depreciation rate for the building and improvement of land, which account for the building being of higher or lower value than the average building in the neighborhood. Wow. And RR is the rate of tax relief. And CR is the annual charge rate expressed in percentage of the assessed market value of the property, in which may at the same government discretion vary between owner-occupied or other property, residential properties, the physical challenge person who have been resident in the same location for at least 12 years, minors, retired owner and occupier, and on one hand, and other owner or occupier on the others, yeah. So, yeah, it's very detailed. So, in Nigeria, yeah.
So when you started about how it was very complicated in Lagos and you didn't know what was going on, I was already smiling because really, the land use charge law as we have it in Lagos State now was enacted in 2001, the first one. The second one was enacted a couple of years ago. So the land use charge basically composes of tenement rates,
yeah,
neighborhood improvement charge, and ground rent.
Okay.
3 of them became land use charge, which is what's currently collected in Lagos State currently now. Then for this schedule also, pensioners are exempted from land use charge, but they must pay tenement rates to the local governments. So that's currently what they have now. Then this formula that you have, as per complexity, it's number 1. A lot of people still struggle with it.
Yeah.
So
I understand why.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I like the fact that it's very detailed and it takes into account a lot of factors like the neighborhood and a lot of very detailed aspects in the taxation. At least the tax, if you are able to calculate it, it will be fair. It will be fairer than the other standard fixed rates. At least you can take into account all the development in your neighborhood and all those factors. Yeah, so I really like it. It's very complicated, but yeah, at least it's complete and very detailed. In Morocco, we have a progressive rate for individuals, for example. So we have like up to 5,000 local currencies exempt. And then the rate is progressive for ownership of lands. In Namibia, it's also kind of progressive because the rate is 0.40% per hectare. And then when you own a second, the rate per hectare is increased by 0.25% for each additional farm owned by the same owner, I mean. So it's a kind of also progressive because the first one is taxed at 0.40%, and then for the additional one, the rate is increased by 0.25%. Yeah, so I added to the progressive rate. The transfer tax is generally quite simple. It's a fixed rate in general, like in Kenya, in Ivory Coast. And in Ivory Coast, I highlighted it because of this. They have 1.5% on transfer by resident person of property located abroad. So when you have a property located abroad and you are transferring it, so in Ivory Coast is taxed at the rate of 1.5%. That requires a lot of information between the banks and the tax administration. So otherwise it's very complicated to, it will be very complicated to administer and to track all the transactions. Yeah. So, but I found it interesting. That's why I added to the list of countries I wanted to highlight. In Mozambique, we have like a 2% rate. And what I wanted to highlight here is the increased rate for any purchaser who is resident in a low tax jurisdiction. So they have an increased rate for any purchaser who is resident in a low tax jurisdiction. That is also a very interesting way of taxing the transfers. And finally, we have also progressive rate transfer of transfer tax, like in Namibia. We have different for the agricultural lands, and for other lands, it's also progressive. Yeah, in Ghana, it's collected as a stamp duty. If there is anyone from Ghana here to confirm, stamp duty on transfer, that is also progressive. So we will quickly go through tax administration and collection. Which government should collect the tax? I saw in many English-speaking countries, it's like the local level, like the municipalities of the state of the province. But for most of the French-speaking countries, it's like the central government that's collect the tax. So, which one is more effective and more would be more, yeah, effective, efficient? I don't know. Yeah.
Land tax or tax generally?
Property tax, yeah, land tax.
Okay, property. Okay, yeah. Okay.
So, which government or entity should collect the tax according to you to be more efficient? The local government, yeah? But why local government? Is it easier for them?
Yeah, because basically they are closer to the people and the impact on the usage of land is more to them than the federal.
Okay, that's, yeah, fair enough. So, because they are closer to the taxpayer, they can more administrate it more more easily. So, yeah, okay. So, for francophone countries, maybe we should consider, and lusophone country, I don't know which administration is collecting the tax. Is it local government or the central government? Yeah, and we can start with Senegal.
Oui, pour le cas du Sénégal, en fait, c'est l'État qui collecte, mais au niveau de chaque région, il y a un service des impôts qui est chargé de l'impôt de la région concernée. Donc c'est un service de l'État, mais qui est dans la région concernée ou le département sur place, pour être plus proche de la matière imposable.
So it's mostly the central government, but with decentralized department in each region to collect the tax, yeah. Is it different in your country, in lusophone part? Yeah.
Boa tarde a todos. Como disse o meu colega Sayo, nos países lusófonos, principalmente na Guiné-Bissau, devia ser coletado pelos governos locais. Mas como a implementação das autarquias na Guiné está atrasada, é o governo central que está a coletar. Quando for implementada a nível legal, devia ser realmente as estruturas locais. É assim que acontece noutros países lusófonos, porque praticamente esta prática foi importada de Portugal. Mas neste momento, efetivamente, realmente é o governo central, mas devia ser o governo local. Obrigado.
Thank you very much for sharing. Oh. Yeah. When we know now which government or local entities able to collect, is it like done like self-declaration, or how do you proceed? Like if you know who are the taxpayer, do you send them a bill, or do they have to assess themselves and self-declare? Because in the Netherlands, for example, you receive the blue letter every year telling you that you have to pay this amount. So all the taxpayers are very identified. They know their address, they know where you live. Every time you change address, you have to notify the administration. So they update this every year. So every year you receive your blue letter telling you how much you have to pay. And I hate that. But at least on those countries, taxpayers are very well identified, and they have a fixed address where you can easily find them and send them the bill. But how is it going to work in our countries where the taxpayers are not that easily identifiable, and you cannot really easily find them? How are we going? What are we going to do about that? Do you have any in any jurisdiction something? Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Mpoha Oladele. I am still going to reference what we do in the subnational Ekiti. In Ekiti State, I told you the other time that we have done the mapping of the entire properties in the state. And having achieved that, we have different unique identification number for each properties. So we will now use that to generate assessment bill for all the property based on the approved categorization rates by the governor of the state. And having done this, then we serve each of the buildings accordingly. That's what we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But is it really working? Like everyone will receive the bill on time and everything?
Well,
and
in terms of compliance, from the commercial building, we've recorded a tremendous success.
Mm-hmm.
But for the residential, we are still having issue with the compliance. And there is one of the things that I actually want to ask questions about when Mr. John was talking, because he was talking about the solutions to the problem. He emphasized on the issue of compliance, and I really want to get the scope so that we can leverage on that to achieve more success on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, after identifying the taxpayers and send them the bill or ask them to declare themselves, we need to also, this is for the ownership part, but for the transfer part, it's easier in many countries because we have a third person and general who can be the tax collector, like generally the notary, who have to collect the tax before even issuing the deed, the transfer deed. Yeah. So it's kind of easier with the transfer real estate transfer tax. And regarding the dispute, because we can imagine that the valuation can lead to a lot of dispute, because the taxpayer and the tax administration may have different view on the value of the property, and those kind of disputes can be also solved in many regions by a commission, like a mixed commission, with tax administration, the local government, and people also in charge in village of the lands. So those mixed commission generally are used for dispute resolutions. Yeah. So yeah, for the digitalization of the economy that we will talk about on the third and fourth day, like the geospatial datas, we can use the digitalization for issuance of property title, collection, update of cadastral register, and also for automatic and exchange of information between tax administration and administration in charge of registration of the lands and properties. Yeah. We can easily track payment and assess the income, etc. So that are the prospects for the digital economy and how we can use that in assessing and to identify also the taxpayer and collect the tax even, because we can also digitalize the collection mechanism. Yeah. So that was it for me. And if you have any question, we still have maybe done, how many questions can we have?
We still have 5 minutes for the time, so we can take 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah, madam.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for the lecture. It's quite educative. My question here is property tax as far as it goes now. Are we trying to find a standard across the West African countries or the globe, or like a standard for everybody to use, or it's just a knowledge you want to impact on us as far as we could amend to our existing policies and how we go about our taxations? Thank you.
Yes, but the difficulty with the harmonization is also how the tax administration, depending on the power of the tax administration. Because if you want, for example, to base on the value, and it's not easy for all the tax administration across the West Africa to easily assess the value. So some of them may want to use the easiest method based on the surface, for example, because it's easier to assess and easier to calculate. So it depends on compliance issue in different countries and what we want to achieve with the property taxation. And we can see that on the rate, it's quite almost the same across the region, but yeah, some countries have like higher rate than others. It depends on the policy and what you want to achieve with this taxation. So we are trying to reach to a harmonization. And is it even the main issue in those countries? Is property taxation is it the main contributor to the GDP in those countries? Is it the solution to those countries in terms of implementation, in terms of tax collection, in terms of yeah?
Thank you.
yeah, Madam Doctor.
I just wanted to add to what he's just said regarding trying to standardize. Now, the reality is that each of our local contexts is different. Our laws are different. So standardization would be very difficult to accomplish. You know how difficult it is to change laws. So I don't think there is an aim to globally try to change and standardize the way everything is done. There might be an argument, for example, within a certain country to standardize certain things where it's feasible. But ideally what we would, and collect, and I will be going into that in our sessions, what we normally advise when we work with governments is to find solutions that work within their own context. And when I say context, it's not just the laws, but your technical operations, your political context, and your taxpayer trust situation. And if you approach it in that way throughout the cycle, you will be able to find solutions that work within your context. Trying to fit a single context that we are, or a single example that we found somewhere to every context may not be the best approach. However, there are things that we know that really help. So for example, IT can help, but what sort of IT works for your country or your state might be different. So you need to really be thinking about what is needed, what can facilitate efficiency. And I think with that approach, you will find a solution that works for you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Other contribution? Yeah. Yeah.
Merci, monsieur. Moi, c'est Keita Moussa de la Guinée-Conakry. Pratiquement, nous avons le même système que le Sénégal et la Côte d'Ivoire et autres. Notre système d'imposition est progressif. Mais je voudrais juste savoir quelque chose qui m'est arrivé à l'idée. Puisqu'on parle de l'égalité entre les contribuables, et à l'issue de cela, il va être question d'appréhender la fortune des riches. Est-ce que dans vos expériences dans le monde, vous avez constaté par exemple où la valeur locative est faite en fonction de la floraison des activités de revenus? Je veux dire, si vous prenez Abuja, vous savez, vous pouvez constater que si nous sommes à cette localité, les activités peuvent être plus florissantes ici qu'à 200-300 km de Abuja. Puisqu'on parle de l'égalité sur les fortunes, quelqu'un qui a ses activités ici, où il y a beaucoup d'activités économiques, est-ce que dans la chaîne mondiale, on a pensé à cela? Moi qui suis là, il y a plein de personnes qui viennent, on me fait payer la même chose que celui-là qui a construit à 300 km où peut-être que les gens ne viennent pas. Parce qu'à l'issue de cet atelier, il faudrait aussi qu'on pense à innover. Donc moi, je souhaiterais savoir, est-ce que dans vos expériences dans le monde, les bâtis sont faits en fonction des niveaux ou en fonction de l'émergence du milieu? Je vous remercie.
Ok, merci beaucoup pour cette question de la Guinée. So on this question, I would say in most of the countries, they take that into account, like the region or the location of the land and the uses of the land. Where the land is located is one of the main factors to determine the value, the market value or the transfer value or the rental value. This factor is always taken into account, and we saw in the example of Nigeria, for example, it's even more details. It's even the neighborhood, like it's not even the city. It's just it can be more precise in the neighborhood how the and what kind of material have been used to build the house also sometimes. So it's very important to take that into account, and I think in most of the jurisdiction and the legislation in the world, they take that into account already, the location of the property and the uses of the property, sometimes both of them, and to have more fair taxation system for property. So I think it's already taken into account in all the jurisdiction I know so far. So I haven't encountered where the rate doesn't take into account those location or uses or other economic factors. Yeah. Thank you. Other question? The last one. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup pour la présentation. Je ne sais pas si on a eu la réponse à la différence entre l'impôt sur la fortune et l'impôt sur les immobiliers. Je comprends que l'impôt sur la fortune regroupe et l'impôt sur les transferts des propriétés et l'impôt sur l'immobilier. Par exemple, chez moi, au Togo, pour l'impôt sur le transfert des propriétés, il y a les droits d'enregistrement qu'on perçoit là-bas. Maintenant, sur l'impôt sur l'immobilier, il y a également la taxe foncière et les revenus fonciers qui sont perçus là-bas. Est-ce qu'il y a quelle différence, comme l'a posé le collègue, le monsieur de Nigeria, quelle différence nette qu'on peut mettre entre les deux notions pour ne pas mettre dans la même assiette, dans la même base, les mêmes éléments d'imposition et cumuler en ce sens et mettre beaucoup plus de charges sur le contribuable. Je ne sais pas si c'est demain ou bien tout de suite on aura la différence. Merci.
Okay, on that question, we are coming back to the difference between property taxation and wealth taxation. But it's a very controversial, but as I said, the main difference, the main characteristic of wealth tax is the threshold. On my sense, the threshold is the main characteristic. So you can have like a property taxation, like a general property taxation, but for property up to a certain, above a certain amount of the value, if the value is above a certain threshold, now you collect a wealth tax on it, because you suppose that if someone own a property of this value or above this value, that person is rich, and you can collect wealth taxation on that. You can collect wealth taxation also on specific items, like very luxurious vehicles. Import of luxurious vehicle, some countries collect a wealth tax on that, because it's supposed that the person importing this or buying this is a rich person. So it's the main characteristic for me is the threshold of taxation. Otherwise, it's an income tax, but it's a special income tax above a certain threshold. Yeah, so you need to identify first who is considered as rich, and then collect the wealth tax from them. And so the scoping of the taxpayers is the main issue in most of the places where they implemented that. So yeah, so I believe that we can say that the main criteria is the threshold of taxation, like the value or the income or the goods you are buying or you own. So it's mostly the threshold that for me is the difference between normal property taxation and wealth taxation, because we need to define what is wealth, who is wealthy, and then tax that person. Yeah.
I think, good afternoon. Thank you for your clarification. I wanted to speak on this wealth taxation in the morning, and I'm very happy to hear when Dan said there is no West African country already implementing this. There are so many issues that we need to look at, and we cannot just rush into that wealth. To me, we are just bringing up multiple taxation. You just said it's a matter of threshold. So if it's a matter of threshold, why are we bringing up a new term to say this is wealth taxation? We should go ahead with our normal income tax, taxation of high net worth individual, look for efficient ways to implement it, rather than bringing up a new term to say we are taxing wealth.
I agree. Yeah.
If I may, so I just wanted to say, I see your point in the sense that income taxation is already in play. However, wealth taxation is a tax on assets, not earned income. And that brings us back to that initial question that was raised, I think, by Dan or perhaps Aziz, about whether it is fair to tax people's wealth. If I've worked hard and earned my income and I'm able to then buy an asset, should you be taxing me? Those are questions that West African countries have to answer for themselves and then decide whether they want to tax wealth. As far as I know, there are countries in West Africa who are already doing capital gains tax. It is a wealth tax. It's not an earned income tax, it's a wealth tax. Your rental income is an earned income tax, but it's an earning on an asset, and it's therefore a wealth tax. So I think that some of the West African countries are already doing wealth taxation, they just don't call it that. And I would like to say that, as you saw in the presentations, wealth tax covers quite a number of, so rental income is one of them, capital gains is another, inheritance taxation is another. Yeah, so wealth tax could be whatever you define it to be in your context. But what is important is that those definitions should be clear. And whatever you want to apply it to should be acceptable to your electorate, your citizens, otherwise they might vote you out or something. But it's something you need to consider in doing this. And then in terms of thresholds, you know, should I say, conventionally in the literature, when you talk about property taxes, you're talking about recurrent taxes on property, and usually those taxes are linked to domestic services, and that's why it's local governments that tend to apply them and administer them. When you talk about property related taxes, then you're talking about all properties that have to do with your tax. All taxes that have to do with your property, and therefore you can include capital gains, rental tax, and so on and so forth. And I think when we go into tax administration and policy later, we might be able to sort of clarify some of those questions, which is why Dan was saying maybe you should wait till the next session.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more about it later this afternoon. Thank you.
So last question before we stop over there.
In addition to what...
Good afternoon.
As I said earlier, in addition to what she just said, it depends on the definitions given to that particular tax. Because if you begin to look at the complexity of wealth tax, I would like to make reference to France as it was presented. Even France had to modify, to change the name from wealth tax to a new form of tax, that is related to exit tax in 2018. So you can see it's also boiling down to property tax as well. So it depends on what you define it, because I look at the property tax in terms of what you wanted to introduce in luxury tax. If you look at it in Nigeria, it was targeting all those items or conspicuous goods. Okay? So it depends on the definition of what you define it to be. If not, it becomes a multiplicity of tax, like what I said earlier. If one person pays income tax, he pays property tax, he pays capital gain tax, and then he now pays wealth tax. Is that not amounting to multiplicity of tax, which invariably will also have a crowding out on effect on investment? Because people who are having a lot of taxes, they will begin to maybe withdraw. If I'm going to produce more, I will tax more. Why not remain where I am? Yeah. So it's a whole issues of debates anyway.
Yeah, and I hope by the end of this workshop we will find a kind of solution. So maybe the last comment before we go.
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, the case of Cross River State, I'm from Cross River State. Wealth taxation is not really a new type of taxation. Based on what we are doing there, it is just an extension of property tax, which is also an income tax. In Cross River State, I am the head of HNI, High Net Worth Individual. When we assess you and we look at your income, we discover that you are more than a certain threshold. We migrate you automatically. It's just the difference is just the code that we are giving to use and pay. So saying wealth taxation is a new taxation or multiple taxation, I think I debunk that assertion. So wealth taxation is still income tax, which rental income or property tax is a subset of it. So it's not a new taxation, please. I guess you didn't get me clearly.
Okay. Thank you very much for your contribution. I think... okay, I think we all learned a lot from each other, and I learned more from you than I gave you any knowledge. So I'm very happy to to have this session with you. We will have another session tomorrow on capital gain and income, rental income taxation. So I look forward for that, so we can still continue learning from each other. Thank you very much, and thanks.